and probably won't get there today either. But we started looking at some things. Jesus is the Messiah. And in chapter 8 of Matthew, we looked at just a couple of things, how that God is concerned with individuals. Jesus, he didn't minister only to crowds. He had time for individuals. He made time for individual needs and things like that, and in small crowds and things. And we tagged out on the point that God can meet every need. We noticed through these two chapters that Jesus was busy. Now, he was busy. He was turning around. He was healing and delivering and setting free at every point. And I covered some. I didn't really go very deep into the scripture. We didn't really break things down a whole lot. We just covered some highlights, really, some high points in some of that. And we looked at 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. And so that's kind of where we kind of left things at there. This morning, what I want to do, I want to dig a little bit deeper. Because what I want to cover today is the biblical grounds for divine healing. Now, I know we've been there before. We've taught on these things before. We've tried to instruct on these things before and drill these things in before. But there's some other aspects that I want us to, from these scriptures, I believe if we will study them intently, we will get a firmer understanding of divine healing. And God responds to faith. God doesn't respond to emotions. And nothing wrong with emotions per se. But God doesn't respond to emotions. I don't care how much you cry and blow snot bubbles and everything else. That does not what moves God. I don't care how much you laugh and shout and hoot and holler and everything. That's good. It has its place again. But that is not what moves God. That doesn't impress God in the least. That is not what moves God. I don't say that God doesn't enjoy praise and worship. Of course, he does. But what really moves God, the Bible tells us specifically, faith pleases God. And without faith, it is impossible. So if we're shouting on credit, so to speak, if we're shouting not on faith or anything else we're doing that's not of faith, that's not pleasing to God. Faith pleases God, and without faith, it's impossible. I didn't say the word says it. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So there are some things that I believe we're going to see in here, how that God responds to faith. We've already looked at a few things. Look at chapter 8, verse 10. We saw with the centurion, Jesus says, had great faith. When Jesus heard this centurion's faith, he marveled. We talked about how he amazed the Lord. The Lord was awe-stricken by this man's faith. He was impressed by this man's faith. If you want to impress God, exercise faith. And so we see with this man, Jesus said, I've not found so great faith. Not in all of Israel. And so we see he had great faith. Then you look over verse 26 of that chapter. And you see that the disciples were guilty of little faith. He said to them, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? So he sees great faith in that chapter. He sees little faith. While the men who brought their friend over in chapter 9, look at verse 2. It says that, behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said to the sick of the palsy, son, be of good cheer. Thy sins be forgiven thee. So we see there that the men who brought their friend exercised cooperative faith. There is a such thing as cooperative faith, and where you're concerned about friends or loved ones, and you exercise your faith along with theirs. And then, while the sick woman in verse 21 of chapter 9, she operated in or exercised almost a superstitious faith, because she said, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. Now, I understand where she was coming from, but I never quite looked at it like this, but it was almost a superstitious faith. And how many of you know that there's people who are superstitious about things? They think sometimes they have a certain good luck charm, or they have a certain item in their house, or a certain thing they can physically touch or whatever. They think that object will bring them good luck, or bring them healing, or bring them whatever they need. So this woman's faith, if I just touched him with his garment. Now that was nothing wrong with that because she wasn't. It really wasn't superstitious on her part. I'm just using that as an example. Sometimes people have superstitious faith. It really wasn't superstitious. She was just saying, if that's just as close as I can get to him, if that's the only means I can make contact with him, that's what she was saying. It really wasn't superstitious. But there are people who have superstitious faith. Hers almost appeared that way, but of course it wasn't. So Christ asked the same question he asked the two blind men and others in Scripture. Do you believe that I am able to do this, in verse 28 of chapter 9? Do you believe that I am able to do this? Now, I want to find out this morning, what's your reply? What is your reply? Do you believe that he's able to do this? That he's willing to do this? So with that said, now back up with me in chapter 8. I skipped around a few verses just to kind of lay a little foundation. But I want to talk about some kingdom dynamics. I want to get into some detail on this issue. Look at beginning in verse 16, because we left off with the healing of Peter's mother-in-law last time in verse 14, 15. And so let's look beginning in verse 16.